Hello there, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. It is so wonderful to be speaking with you today. Thank you for sharing your time so generously.
Well, thank you for having me, Sateria. This is a really important issue that one I've embraced and many of my colleagues have as well. And I want to thank you for your advocacy and leadership in fibroid research and education. It's so critical that we make the healthcare infrastructure respond to the needs of so many women across our nation and Black women in particular.
I couldn't agree more, and I appreciate you saying that so much. Before we step into our conversation on the Fibroid Research and Education Act, though, I have to just talk about your absolutely incredible background. I was blown away that you and your mom were on city council and that you made history in that. I mean, that is such a special, powerful family legacy. It just warms my heart to see that happen. And also to the committees that you are, displaying such amazing leadership on. The Caribbean Committee, which is an area that we focus on a lot because there's a huge community of women with uterine fibroids in the Caribbean, and we are constantly trying to find resources for them for treatment. So that's major. Homeland Security, oh my goodness. I'm sure the insights that you are lending there are just helping us all. And last but not least, Vice Chair of Energy and Commerce. Oh my goodness. So thank you so much for, all that you've done and continue to do in your role. And so we so appreciate, your time today.
Well, I occupy a unique space in the New York congressional delegation. I'm the only Black woman in our delegation. So I feel it's so very important that I lift up the voices of Black women. And, I embody diversity within myself. As you stated, I co-chair the Caribbean Caucus on Capitol Hill, and that's because I'm a second generation American. My parents came from the beautiful island nation of Jamaica. And what was significant about my mother's election to the New York City Council is that she was the first foreign-born woman actually elected to the New York City Council. I succeeded her in office, and it wasn't easy, let me tell you. I think it's easier when your name is Kennedy than when your name is Clarke. Yeah. But that's for another day. Mm-hmm. And we didn't realize it until I was elected that we're the first ever mother-daughter succession in the history of the New York City Council, the first and only, because people are accustomed, when, there's a doctor in the family, everyone is, not surprised because there's, the children of the doctor would want to become doctors themselves and pursue that course of endeavor. But when it comes to the electoral politics, it becomes a whole nother dynamic because politics is politics. But it's knowing that I have that legacy, knowing that there's so many women who can identify with, again, sort of my background, where I come from, I feel an obligation to speak to those lived experiences. Without my voice in the New York delegation, you don't get that lens, an authentic lens into what women, Black women, women of Caribbean descent, women of the African diaspora are living through, and what their dreams and aspirations are in the United States of America. And so I take that on willingly because I know that voice in the room, that voice in leadership makes a difference.
That's incredible. And I really think there's a book there, Congresswoman. That's a powerful, powerful story. And I think that many young women and girls who are aspiring to leadership would glean so much, whether leadership or not, but they would just glean a lot from that particular beautiful legacy that you just shared with us. So I'm going to hold that one close.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So we're here today to thank you for introducing the fibroid bill, the Fibroid Research and Education Act 2020, into Congress. And I was just blown away in March, where we had just begun to shelter in place, and I was kind of reflecting back on my time on Capitol Hill, where I felt really honored to be able to meet with your fellow legislators about introducing this bill. And we met with your office and were embraced immediately. And to see that even in the midst of a pandemic, you showed such wonderful, just thoughtfulness and leadership and guidance to be able to bring forth this important piece of legislation to introduce it. And I'm curious, why was this particular piece of legislation so important to you?
Well, I mean, it's a story that is not often told. But when I first was elected into the House of Representatives in 2007, began serving, I actually entered the body carrying fibroids myself and had lived with these fibroids in my body for a good 10 years. So throughout sort of my elective office, didn't take the time out to really deal with my own personal health. And by the time I was successful in being elected to Congress, I knew that the quality of my life had diminished so much, and that I was giving to everyone except myself, that was when I knew I had to address the issue. I coupled that with a mentor of mine when I first came into Congress, who was actually carrying this legislation, the Honorable and late Stephanie Tubbs Jones. And she was my mentor. We were very, very close colleagues. And I explained to her what I had experienced coming into Congress. And she said to me, you know, I have this legislation. I hope you'll co-sponsor it with me, because this is an issue for Black women across the spectrum. I recognized that it was you know, a part of some of the challenge that Black women have had with their health. I just didn't realize how many Black women were experiencing it, how it was really endemic in the lives of so many Black women, women in general. And that's when, you know, I took hold of this legislation and the battle to really get government to fund research and to be focused on the need to address the Black women's health. And that's what HR 6383 indicates for me.
And what you shared is a theme that so many of us can relate to, because we focus on our daily lives, our jobs, our families, taking care of others, um, and we are not always taking the best care of ourselves. And I think it's also important to note that the strength of women. You know, we share stories about the strength that is shown by um, just persevering through these symptoms, and you have done that, and so you can understand very intimately, you know, what the walk of women with uterine fibroids is all about. And so we appreciate you doing that. I know that you have been very closely you've been supportive of fibroids education and awareness for quite some time. Can you kind of share more about the background of the bill?
Sure. Well, what this bill will do is make sure that, you know, we're in an era where we have raised up Black lives in all of its manifestations. We know that there are health disparities that, particularly in this period of time, have been laid bare due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But underlying that is a public health infrastructure that had not been responsive to the health and well-being of communities of color. So if Black Lives Matter, Black health matters, right? And if Black health matters, research matters. And if research matters, funding for research matters. Funding for education matters. And to the extent that we can get the attention of the National Institute of Health and the CDC and all of our healthcare arm focused on educating the population, Black females specifically, but women overall, because we're not the only women who suffer from uterine fibroids, but really educating us as to how we can detect the growth of uterine fibroids, how we can look at various treatment modalities, and shed some of the old thinking, if you will, around how one treats uterine fibroids. This research would go into varying treatments, variant therapies that we need so that women can be treated in a healthy and responsive way. And that has been part of the challenge around uterine fibroids. It speaks to the way in which Black bodies are treated within the healthcare infrastructure, and to a large extent, some of the callousness in response to Black women's health. And what we want to do is make sure that, we include everyone in that research. I'd like to see collaborations between some of our HBCU medical schools and the NIH, so that we're looking at a culturally competent treatment. Because we know that there have been some treatments that have been, I think, not focused on the human, but focused on the fibroid, and have led to outcomes that were undesirable, that have left women feeling less whole, and we want to put an end to that.
That is so insightful, because most of what we bring or try to bring is that patient voice, to be able to say, this treatment may have been well intended, but this is the patient perspective on how it feels to receive this treatment, how it feels to take these medications, to be prepared for this treatment, how it feels to attend this doctor's visit, and the interaction in the doctor's visit. And oftentimes it's eye-opening to the healthcare provider. And so it's so important. I'm so glad that you touched on that so deeply. It's so important to really have that collaborative dialogue, because I always say a patient is an expert in their own body. So women are experts in their own bodies. And so when they bring their expert feedback and pair it with the feedback from the healthcare provider, that can create a very good and sustainable solution with those two areas of expertise. So thank you for sharing that. So you talked very just beautifully about how the patient brings a very unique perspective. And I'm so glad that you highlighted that, because a lot of what we do is focused on bringing that unique patient voice, in getting vial sizes reduced so that women don't leave the office as anemic, being able to bring their unique experience to bear on the ultimate treatment option that's decided upon. So that's very important for women to know, to be able to feel comfortable to take charge of their own medical health. And so
absolutely. And I also believe that, it's just as much as we're talking about treatment, research should be done so that we can talk about prevention. One of the things about uterine fibroids is that it remains a mystery. to patients, to doctors, to the medical community overall. And there needs to be a focus on that,
I
you
agree.
know, and this way we can talk to our girls and prepare them for what their health should feel and look like. And that ultimately would be the real goal.
Yes.
And beyond that, you know, what will be the variety of treatments available to women, young women, childbearing women, you know, along the continuum of growth of fibroids? Because
Yeah.
some women, you know, may have one fibroid, some may have as many as 30. Some may have one the size of a golf ball, others may have one the size of a cantaloupe. Various bodies experience different things with the growth of uterine fibroids, and we need to get to the heart of the matter. And that's what my bill would do. It would help us unpack and encourage a real discipline around finding out what ultimately causes it.
It would be groundbreaking, and I couldn't agree more. And so as we move forward with the bill, please let us know how we what the next steps are and how we can continue to support to move the legislation along.
Well, we are blessed to have 36 members co-sponsoring the bill
Okay.
currently. I'd like to see us get up to over 200
Okay.
co-sponsors in the House of Representatives. And it would be great if it's bipartisan,
Yes.
that we reach out to both Republicans and Democrats to be a part of our march for quality health care for Black women. And likewise, working with Senator Kamala Harris, our vice presidential nominee, on the Senate side, reaching out to our US senators. You know, this again, I think is low hanging fruit in terms of an ask for their support. And I think that we can't be shy in expressing to our leadership in the United States House of Representatives what an imperative this is for us. And so where we can get women across this nation mobilized and emphatic about them sponsoring this legislation, that's the momentum we need to get it signed into law.
I couldn't agree more. And with 1 in 3 women being diagnosed, this is definitely not a partisan issue because everyone knows someone with uterine fibroids. And so, and I often ask people, ask the women in your family, ask your spouse or your partner, and just, you know, someone who has fibroids, and you'd probably be surprised to know that. And so, with that many people being affected, I think that gives us the momentum to just really move forward and support you in getting those letters, having the meetings, and garnering that additional support. So I
And
thank you.
it's putting forth the ask.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a heavy lift for most members. If they need education and information, my office is available to provide it for them. As co-chair of the Caucus on Black Women and Girls, you know, I have made this a priority. And what I would like to share is that, you know, we did introduce this bill at the beginning of the shutdown, and everyone has been just sort of dispersed out of necessity. But it doesn't mean that we can't pick up the phone, that we can't email information with the bill number on it and get those members to sign on. And again, we're in communication mode. We're back in Washington. We're voting in the House of Representatives. I would love to see this bill advance, and your advocacy and your encouragement will put it over the top.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, we hear you, and we can definitely support those initiatives. And I thank you for laying out those very specific next steps that we can all take to make this a reality. And Congresswoman, thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for your time today. Thank you to your staff, who has been absolutely lovely. And we really look forward to building this relationship to walk with you to a successful outcome of creating this legislation. And I wish you the best during these times, and look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Soteria.